to the first seminar of our Borlaug seminar series for this semester. It's a great pleasure to be here on campus in person, not just virtually, but we are still very excited about having virtual attendees. That's always gonna be with us, I think. But it's great to see people in person here as well. It is a great pleasure to introduce to you our speaker for this morning. He comes from an excellent university, Virginia Tech. I was blessed enough to receive my master's and PhD from Virginia Tech. So I have a lot in common with our speaker, Dr. Thompson, who has come all the way from Virginia Tech here to College Station, Texas to give this presentation. And I think you're going to find it to be really useful and as well as interesting and fascinating and challenging. Okay. He is Associate Dean and Director of the Global Program from the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at Virginia Tech. He's also Professor of Agronomy at Virginia Tech. He earned a bachelor's degree from Abilene Christian College in agronomy, so he is a Texan. Okay. Master's degree from Texas A&M University in soil chemistry and fertility, and a doctorate in soil chemistry from Iowa State University. Another thing we have in common. What's that? No cyclones? No cyclones. All right. No cyclones. Let's see. Well, we'll stop there. Okay. So, before his current appointment, though, Dr. Thompson was a professor and extension specialist at the University of Arizona, is where he started his career. He was chairman of the Department of Plant and Soil Sciences at Texas Tech University. Okay. And was professor and department head for crops and soil environmental sciences at Virginia Tech. He has published more than 65 refereed journal articles, has secured more than $7 million in extramural competitive funding, and more than $11 million in philanthropic support. He led research and outreach on the Central Plateau of Haiti in a project funded by USAID, and coordinated the research portfolio and graduate education for the USAID Education and Research Program in Agriculture in Senegal. He has mentored graduate students from many parts of the world, specifically from West and Southern Africa, so from South Asia, Central and South America. He's executive editor of the Global Agricultural Productivity Report, or GAP report. I hope a lot of you are familiar with the GAP report. It's a really great publication that brings a lot of very important subjects to light. The annual report is a global leader, actually, in agricultural productivity. Okay. He is a fellow of the American Society of Agronomy, Soil Science Society of America, LEAD 41, and the Food Systems Leadership Institute. And Dr. Thompson is chair-elect of the International Agriculture section of the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, or APLU. So help me give a warm Aggie welcome to Dr. Thompson.
Thank you, Dr. Milano. I wanted to start with this picture of the Virginia Tech campus. These are the war memorial pylons that overlook the drill field. The drill field is the physical and in many ways kind of the spiritual heart of Virginia Tech. In the middle there you can see is the cenotaph, which contains the names of the 7 Virginia Tech students who have been awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. According to Virginia Tech's website, Virginia Tech is one of 3 public universities in the country with both an active Corps of Cadets and a civilian lifestyle on campus. Now, does anybody know who the other 2 universities are?
You know what?
That's what you call a softball. Softball question. The other is in Georgia. I'm not exactly sure. It's like UGA. It's a smaller university. But anyway, we have that in common. So I wanted to establish that kinship between Virginia Tech and Texas A&M, and having spent 2 years as a student, as a master's student here at A&M, I see a lot of similarities. Of course, the core is a big part of that, and fanatical football. So calling this, if we build it, will they come?
I'll click it.
And oh, no. Let me do that. Okay. It's an unusual title for what I think is going to be a little bit of an unusual talk. This is not a research talk. This is reflections on an academic startup. I just want to be sure that everyone knows I'm really grateful for this invitation. I was able to meet with Dr. Morano when she was on the Virginia Tech campus receiving an outstanding alumnus award. And we started talking, and I think that was kind of the genesis for my coming here. I'm very grateful. As you've heard, it is a homecoming of sorts for me, having or being a former student. And I'm really thrilled to be here. When I was, and to be speaking at the Borlaug Institute, when I was a master's student here, I was able to meet Dr. Borlaug. And he spoke to a group of graduate students, and he shook my hand and he said something very inspirational to me. And I knew at that moment I would not live up to it, but it was very inspiring. Certainly, he's inspired a lot of generations, certainly my generation, which came, pretty close after he won the Nobel Peace Prize. So I'm very grateful to be here. So I'm going to talk to you about CALS Global. That's the unit that I lead. Our mission at Virginia Tech in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences is to build partnerships, drive thought leadership, and create opportunities to serve globally. I mean, in a sense, we are the Virginia Tech equivalent of the Borlaug Institute, but on a very different scale, and we're a startup. So I thought this would be an opportunity to reflect a bit on where we are, where we're going, what we've learned, and hopefully spark a discussion with many of you. And by the way, thank you for coming. Thanks to everybody on Zoom. There are many familiar faces here. Jack Elliott and I were on faculty at Arizona at the same time. And Matt Baker and I were partners in crime in Texas Tech. David Baltonsberger and I met during our interviews for different positions in Lubbock, Texas, and known each other ever since, worked together. We're fellow department heads at two different institutions at Gary Briers. We got to work together a few months ago. So it's great that you all showed up. I really appreciate it. I don't want to go any farther, of course, without introducing my team. We all do these things in teams, and I have a wonderful one. I think at least one of my team members is on the call. So I just want to acknowledge their work. When CALS Global started in 2017, the guy on the bottom right was CALS Global. And since then, we've been able to grow. That's actually quite, I think, impressive growth. In 5 years, we're now 4 full-time positions, including myself, and then 2 part-time positions, including a student. We also have a couple of interns that are on here. And at this point, I want to say also that I have, in CALS Global, has benefited greatly from strong support from my college. Our college, my dean, Alan Grant in particular, have been very supportive of this effort, and I'm very grateful there. And if any failings are my fault and not theirs, but they've been very strongly supported. But I have a great team, very grateful to have them.
Somebody in the chat saying hi to you.
I think I got to be careful with these buttons here. Virginia Tech is a land-grant university, so no surprises there. We're a little bit smaller, I think, than A&M is now, about 37,000 students, vet school, med school, $500 million in research expenditures. We're not a system, we're just a university. And our main campus is in Blacksburg, but we do have some smaller campuses in the Northern Virginia, DC area. Building a big one now that we call the Innovation Campus in Alexandria. That's kind of part of the deal that brought Amazon's HQ2 to Northern Virginia. College of Ag and Life Sciences has 3,000 undergraduates, 650 grad students, about half are PhD. PhD is 50 million in research expenditures. And of course, we lead the Ag Experiment Station and Virginia Cooperative Extension, which I'll just say a word about. Virginia Cooperative Extension is kind of an interesting model that we have in Virginia, because we have an 1890 land-grant university in Virginia, Virginia State University. Of course, Prairie View A&M is the 1890 in Texas, but Virginia Cooperative Extension is a collaboration between those two universities. We don't have 2 extension systems, we have just one. It's a collaboration. operations. That's a very, and by the way, we leverage that in Cal's Global. We partnered with Virginia State on a number of things. Okay, how did I get here? Dr. Morano mentioned some of these. I'll just say, really, my career has been pretty typical of academics, guiding students, visiting scientists, etc. My international engagement happened very slowly, and then all at once. And that all at once really came after I came to Virginia Tech. So Virginia Tech has a university level office that has been in the past very successful in winning and implementing USA projects. Most of that's in agriculture, but they're not in the College of Ag and Life Sciences. And so I got involved in a couple of projects with them, Haiti and Senegal. Just kind of happened all of a sudden. Here I am, a guy that doesn't speak French. Too old to learn, evidently, because I really tried. So I end up working in Francophone countries. Go figure. So that's kind of how I got to this point in 2016, late 2016, after having been a department head for 10 years at 2 universities. By the way, my favorite job I've ever had is being a department. Nevertheless, this opportunity came up and it seemed like it was a great opportunity for me and a great time to do it. So since late 2016, this is what I've been doing. And so what I'm going to do at this point is kind of jump ahead, jump to the middle of the story. Because I tried to think about how to tell this story, I couldn't figure out how to make it make sense in a linear fashion. So I'm going to talk first about the Global Agricultural Productivity Initiative, or GAP initiative. Dr. Morano mentioned the GAP report. It's such an important part of the story that I think it kind of needs to be called out. So that's where I want to start. By the way, this is the GAP report. I have a few copies. I don't want to carry it home if you don't mind passing that around. The GAP report was started by a group called the Global Harvest Initiative. Global Harvest Initiative was a 501c3, that's an industry group, a nonprofit group in 2010. And they started the GAP report. It was published by them 2010 until 2018. At that time, the board of Global Harvest Initiative decided that that organization was going to cease operations. But they wanted the GAP report to live on. They thought the work was too important to let go. They reached out to a few land-grant universities and gave us the opportunity to compete. We competed and we won. And so since then, since 2019, we've been the home for the Global Agricultural Productivity Report. You can see these are the covers of the 3 GAP reports that we've published so far. The 4th one is going to come in a couple of weeks, and I'll show you how you can engage in that if you like. So let me talk about what the work is. I am not an ag economist. Are there any ag economists in the audience? Oh, good, because I really don't like talking about agricultural productivity with ag economists around, because I am not one. We have experts. I don't need to be the expert. I just try to keep the ship afloat. So the GAP initiative, and the GAP report is the heart of the GAP initiative, is a tool for advocating for accelerating agricultural productivity growth at all scales of agriculture for food and nutrition security, economic growth, resilience, and environmental stewardship. If you take a look at it, you can see it's not a data-heavy report. It's not really intended for a technical audience. It's intended for a very broad audience. We're especially interested in targeting decision makers and policy makers. So when we see secretaries of agriculture, ministers of agriculture, or undersecretaries, et cetera, attending our events, that's a target-rich environment for us. Of course, we want to communicate with scientists and with technical audiences and with the public. And it's accessible, it's readable by the public. So the GAP report was, it was serendipity. When we started out Cal's Global in 2017, this was never part of the plan. So it happened, it's serendipity, but it has been a huge differentiator for us. And it's been, we essentially try to weave it into everything that we do: student engagement, faculty engagement, et cetera. Okay, this slide is to help me explain a little bit about what we mean by productivity growth. Productivity and production are not the same thing. So please remember that. We're not just talking about do we produce more wheat or vegetables, whatever. Think about this. In sometime in the early 2000s, Norman Borlaug said we need to produce more food in the next 50 years than we did in the first 10,000. So that's the premise of the AFRIC report. We need to essentially double food production from a baseline in the early 2000s, or double agricultural production. The question is, how do we do that? So if you think at a very huge level, a very macro level, how do we do that? Well, we can expand land, right? We can just take forest land, grassland, savanna, marsh, wetlands, et cetera. We can turn it into cultivated land. That's one strategy. Clearly, it's been used since the beginning of human history. We can extend irrigation. That's a good strategy. Africa, for example, there's tremendous potential for increasing irrigation in Africa to greatly improve production of agricultural products. Or we can intensify our use of inputs, right? Add more fertilizers per acre, or other inputs per acre. Now, I think we'd say in Europe, US, China, we kind of reached the limit, really. We probably don't need to intensify inputs. Certainly we can use better and improved technologies, but the actual massive inputs, maybe we don't need to increase that. But in Africa, still less than 20 kilograms per hectare of nutrients are applied on agricultural lands. That's probably a fifth or 10th, something like that, of what's actual. Okay. So those are all strategies, and they can be fine, they can be appropriate in given circumstances. The one we're specifically advocating for is total factor productivity. Now, since none of us are ag economists, I can define it for you here. Total factor productivity, I think I can move on to the next slide, measures the changes in how efficiently agricultural inputs are turned into outputs. Okay, so it's another way to put that is it's how efficiently we use inputs and resources in agriculture. It's a measure of efficiency. Okay, so when total factor productivity goes up, that means that farmers are adopting practices that allow them to produce more with either the same or less inputs. It's an indicator of technical change. So kind of at the center of the GAP report premise is that based on the 2010 baseline, which is when the GAP report was initiated, if we assume that by 2050, for an expected population between 9 and 10 billion, we don't exactly know where that's going to end up, obviously, we need to approximately double agricultural output within that 40-year time frame. We have to make increasing total factor productivity a big part of that, because we talked about this on a previous slide, but think about in Africa. I can tell you now in Africa, historically, the biggest contributor to increased agricultural output is converting lands to agriculture. So many of those lands are marginal lands. They disrupt wildlife corridors. They increase conflicts between humans and wildlife, so many, and so forth. So we're focusing on increasing total factor productivity. The green line indicates the sustained growth that we need, the 1.73% per year, from 2010 to 2050. The orange line tells you where we are below what. We're falling behind. The red line indicates the trend and then the projection for low. So what's really alarming is that low-income countries are losing productivity growth. So that's alarming. We should all be concerned about that. And that's what makes the work of organizations like the World Institute so important. We can do analyses by income group. That's what you see on the bottom of this slide. We do analyses regionally, by country, etc. So that's kind of the underlying message of the GAP report. The data don't change very much from year to year. We're not reporting on a year. We report 10-year logs so that we take out, individual annual variations. But the trends are clear and not terribly encouraging. The GAP report itself from the beginning has been supported financially, mostly by large agribusiness companies. You can see at the top, we have 5 supporting partners plus Virginia Tech. And those supporting partners provide not only their input, their expertise, but also the financial support to make the report happen. So it's mostly externally supported. We have consultative partners who also contribute intellectually, and they help us tell stories about total factor productivity. One of the things we always try to do in the gap report is to talk about why does it matter? What kinds of things increase productivity at different scales of agriculture, and why should we care? So our partners, who are all nonprofits, our consultative partners, help us tell that story. It is the Global Agricultural Productivity Report. We do have global reach. Of course, the U.S. is our largest audience. India is our second largest, I think. But there's really fewer than a dozen countries in the world where we don't have some reach. That could be, web visits. It could be people who sign up for our event, who download copies of the gap report. So pretty proud of that. The 2022 report, so we release a new report in October of each year. Historically, we've done that at the World Food Prize in Iowa. We decided to go out on our own, and now we're going to release it at a standalone event in Washington, D.C. on October 4th. But we're doing this in collaboration with USDA's Sustainable Agriculture Growth Coalition. I think this is a great example of how having the gap report is a multiplier for our college. USDA came to us and said, well, we know you do the gap report. We want to do an event on productivity. So why don't we do one together? So that's what we're doing. We think that the Secretary of Ag, I'm sure he's going to be there and speak at this event. So there's your QR code. So if you're interested in registering, there will be a live stream too. Show up, we'll feed you breakfast. We will have a representative from the Warlock Institute there. Look forward to meeting her. But we'll have the live stream and encourage anybody who can show up. I think it's something very interesting and informative. So we're really excited about that. Okay, that's the gap report. Anything that isn't clear to you about that?
Where are the other copies?
I've got them in my bag.
Okay.
So
I definitely want.
I'll lay them out.
Okay.
5 or 6 of those things will weigh your backpack. I didn't bring more than that, but I don't want to take a single one.
We'll take them, no worries.
Good. Okay, well, good. So I hope you can see, that that's such an important part of our story. I wanted to tell that early on before moving on to the rest of the story. So we are an academic startup. We started in 2017. And so as I've been thinking about this, well, how are we an academic startup? So let me tell you what my thinking here. We're trying to fill an essentially unoccupied market niche. Right? Our college did not have a global or international office before the college opened. So that's an unoccupied niche. We have to develop our own clientele and customers. We have to create the demand. I tell my team this all the time. Okay, we've got academic programs, and research, and extension in our college, and every faculty member in the college has to deal with one to all of those offices. Nobody has to deal with us. They can ignore us if they want to. So we have to create the demand. We have to build that clientele. We have to develop brand recognition. We have to raise capital. Now, I said our college supports us well. They absolutely do. But for what we want to do, we can't do it all with college support. The gap report itself is largely externally funded. We develop products. So the gap report is a great example. And we didn't develop it, but we are growing. We're changing it to adapt to new realities. We need to show a return on investment. Now, that's not my dean saying, here's your return on investment, you're falling behind. That's not the way he does, but it is the way I think. As a department head, I've thought about that a lot. How do we show return on investment? And I want to be able to show that. So if you look up life cycle of a startup, you can find different ways that it's expressed, but this is one that I kind of like. There's a seed where you have an idea, you start thinking about how to operationalize that idea, you put resources in place, that you launch it, you grow it, mature it. And on the right, the decline or exit is where you sell yourself to Google for $50 million. So that's what we're shooting for. We hope we're getting close. So, well, of course, we don't want the decline, but I think that's pretty descriptive. We're probably somewhere in in the launch. Well, we're past the launch, but we're in the growth phase. So now I want to show you this, and please don't try to take notes on it. This is something, this is from an article that we found in Harvard Business Review. And this diagram is called the Entrepreneurial Strategy Compass. Essentially, the 4 quadrants are supposed to indicate different strategies that startups may use in order to succeed. They're not exclusive, but for the most part, startups probably pursue one over the other 3. So intellectual property that is focusing on developing and patenting the knowledge, keeping it to yourself and then marketing it. Architectural is where you really try to build a value chain. Value chain is where you're trying to improve processes within an existing value chain. And finally, disruption is what it sounds like. You're really trying to do something entirely different and leave your competitors in the dust. So as we've thought about that, I think, well, this actually, in some ways, it kind of works for an academic startup. So what have we tried so far? You know, we talked about the gap report, and some of the other things that we've done, I think won't surprise you very much. And I'm not claiming any great originality here, but we've incentivized faculty with small grants for things like study abroad course development, or proofs of concept for international partnerships. We don't give anybody grants to travel to international conferences. I encourage faculty to do that, but we're spend our money. We've given summer salary grants for faculty to launch initiatives. We call that Cal's Global Scholars. We've developed and we lead an early career faculty development program. It's a pretty intensive program. It's about 6 months. We take faculty through what we call spring training, where faculty learn about systems thinking, network dynamics, things like challenge mapping, collaborative problem solving, the kinds of things we typically don't teach faculty. It's not how to write a grant. It's not that. And we call this the Global Opportunity Initiative. We've spent more time and money on this than any other single thing that we've done. We invest in strategic partnerships. When I took this job, first day, I talked to the dean and I said, my goal is to not sign any MOU. I don't want to have anything to do with MOUs. And I have been incredibly successful at that. So we don't do much of that. We try to avoid that kind of thing. Some of you know what I'm talking about. We have, real or virtual file cabinets full of MOUs that never made any difference. So we really try to avoid that. We try to invest in strategic partnerships where there are as many touch points as possible between Virginia Tech and that other organization, and across as many of our missions as possible. In other words, preferably not just research, but research and research and extension, etc. Of course, the gap report, the gap initiative, we have led proposal development. We've submitted some big proposals ourselves, and we have a grant specialist who helps faculty, and then facilitating professional development. So how are we doing so far? This is kind of our report card. We had our 5-year review just a few months ago. So we had to kind of sit back and assess how we're doing and come up with a scorecard, so to speak. When I developed this presentation, the first bullet applied. We raised more than $1.5 million in sponsored and philanthropic funds in 5 years. As of Wednesday, there's new development. So Cal's Global led the development of a Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities program. Who knows what I'm talking about? I think AgriLife got one of
Yes,
those,
we
right?
did.
Okay. So we led one. I was privileged to be the PI of it. And USDA said on Wednesday,
Yep.
we're going to get $80 million. So that's, of course, there's a whole lot of people that were involved in that. And you might ask what the global office is doing on that. It's because we were brought into a coalition with our work with the Gap Report, eventually asked to lead it, and here we are. So it's a great success story, and of course, my teammates, my partners made that happen. So that's a pretty nice story to be able to tell. When we asked faculty in our college and in the College of Vet Med, which we partner with, how have Cal's Global programs benefited you as a faculty? They came back and said, well, we attribute $4 million in external funding. Two things that they've done with Cal Global. I had no idea what that was. Incredible finding. Feel good about that. We've had 21 VT faculty who've gone through our Global Opportunity Initiative, and that's a 6-month program. And then they go with us to Kenya, Rwanda, or Uganda for a capstone experience. And more than 30 African colleagues at 5 different universities in the East Africa region have attended as well. 25 to 30%.
Now you changed the one number to 84 million.
Yeah, I just need to put an 8.
Yeah, that's right, that's right.
So 25 to 30% of Cal's faculty have engaged with us in 5 years. And they seek us out. I'm pretty proud of that number. Of course, it'd be great if it's 100, but it's never going to be 100. I think we all know that. And again, nobody has to interact with us. So I feel really good about where we are with respect to this number. We've launched almost 4 gap reports. And just this summer, we had an event, a gap event in Nairobi. Had a nice audience in person and online. We're going to do at least one international event every year for the gap report. Faculty have developed, taught study abroad courses. We have high impact academic partnerships in Israel, Kenya, and Rwanda. More than 40% of our lifespan has been during COVID. So it's pretty gratifying, I think, to see what we've done despite that. When international engagement, as we all know, ground to a halt. All right. So what have we learned? We've learned that there is no blueprint for success. Let's work with Texas A&M. It's not going to work with Virginia Tech. We don't have the Norman Borlaug name for one thing, but we can't copy anybody, and we shouldn't copy anybody. Academic partnerships are important, but if we want to work in the development space, we have to move beyond that. They're maybe necessary, but certainly not sufficient to compete in the development space. You got to establish a track record, and that's a big hill to climb. Now, leading on an $80 million grant, that might help, but I don't know if it's going to convince USA that they should do this. I'm not sure it's going to make any difference with that. Is that the truth? We have to sell our capabilities, and we have to sell our so salesmanship is an important part of this, but of course there has to be real substance behind that salesmanship. We've learned about the virtues and vices of global international engagement. There's certainly some things that work well. I think we've learned that maybe we don't need to travel as much. There's still no substitute for in person. Non-academic partnerships do. I think they're much more concerned about what tangible things for a partnership. Not so many academic partnerships can be, yeah, we just love each other, right? We want to do stuff together, which we know we'll never do. With private sector partners, especially the big agribusinesses that we work with on the GAP report, you want to have as many champions as you can within that organization, because we're used to kind of the glacial pace of things happening in academia, but in the corporate world, you can be here today, gone tomorrow. So we have one champion in the company, that champion leaves or is frog marched out of the building, then you're in trouble. So, and that requires some serious relationship building. Okay, so where are our opportunities? Well, I think we have an opportunity to blaze our own trail. That's exciting. That kind of is what gets me up in the morning. Promoting disruption. We're really thinking about that now. We're moving. We think in that entrepreneurial compass. We started out in the value chain, just trying to improve things, especially for our faculty. We really want to promote disruption. Think differently, help our faculty think differently, take risks. We think we can really afford to take some risks now. I'm not going to tell you what all those are, because those are trade secrets, but as an academic startup, we can traverse sectors, civil society, academia, private industry, and also different, obviously, topic matters, agriculture, health, community, and the other things that our college is involved in. I think one of the biggest opportunities is helping faculty see how they can afford the challenges of action. So many of our faculty, I don't know how it is, so many of our faculty just don't think that way. And you have to help them think that way. You have to help them see that being active internationally and impact globally doesn't mean you have to live in poverty. But it doesn't have to. So that's a significant opportunity. Building purposeful partnerships with clearly defined outcomes. especially with non-academic partners. That's really where we're going. We're really focusing on private sector, non-academic partnerships, and then building a track record. We think we've started down that road. Becoming conveners. We really want to bring people together. We talked about the GAP report launch this year. Next spring, we're hoping that we have been approached by USDA ERS to co-host a conference with them on agricultural productivity. See, that's the kind of convening that we want to do. Okay, well, I'm actually, since we kind of ran through some time, I can skip to this slide. So my last one. I'll take a few minutes for discussion. So we're going to focus our work around 4 initiatives. Now I can't tell you what they are. They're not radically different from what we've done before. We have some tactics that we really want to employ. We want to really enhance private sector. And that's going to be an important thing for us. And that could be here, but we're also working hard in East Africa region, for example, to form private sector non-academic partnerships. When we think about where we want to be in grant space, we think that if we're leading on a grant that is especially related to ag development, we probably want it to be less than $5 million. Now, I'm just supposed to be $180 million grant. That's not going to happen very often. We have submitted grants to USA for $30 million. I've done that. Took a month out of my life. I'll never get back. So we don't really see ourselves as fitting into that space, but smaller opportunities. We think we also want to be helping to position ourselves to be a partner of choice for larger organizations that are applying for USAID and other kinds of development money. But of course, they have to know what that value proposition is that we're bringing to the table. And then positioning ourselves to benefit from non-competitive funding streams. Already having some success with that. That's kind of where we are. That's my story of an academic startup. I appreciate your attention. And again, thank you for the opportunity. It's great to be here. And have any time. Glad to play.
So much, Dr. Thompson. We do have time certainly for questions. And let me ask the first one, if I may. And I'm very curious. I'm familiar with the GAP report. I look forward to it every year. This one that's coming up in 3 weeks or so. Obviously, we've had on a global scale, we've had some issues with conflict. Obviously, the Ukraine war, and as we know, that and COVID have affected, supply chain and so forth. So, can you speak a little bit about, what is expected from the report in terms of how those things have and are affecting total productivity as well?
It's an interesting question. So the topic of our 2020 report and released in October 2020 was productivity in a time of pandemics. And we did talk a lot about that. Now, the interesting thing about the data, so we use all publicly available data. Our source of data is USDA ERS that collates that data globally. I think it's some of it from FAO, other sources. That's the source of the data. We work closely with them. We're the first unit, or first entity outside of ERS that's allowed to use and release that data. However, that data always runs a couple of years behind. So what you'll see in this year's report, we're going to talk about the conflict, and we're going to talk about obviously pandemic impacts, but we really aren't seeing them show up. It's going to be years too. That's one of the disadvantages of that data. I mean, there's an enormous amount of information that goes into calculating. So, yeah. But I mean, no doubt we're going to see them show up. Absolutely, a year or two, those will actually show up.
Good. Let me see. Question, Dr. Gillette.
Are you willing to share maybe one of your top skills to improve private sector engagement? What do you think is the most useful thing for people to do to improve that engagement?
I think you need to know clearly and articulate your value proposition. So what is it you bring to the table? Typically, private sector is much more, I don't know how to put this. I don't want to say much more results oriented. I don't think we're much, well, that's right, but short-term results oriented. Know who you're talking to. talking to the business side or the philanthropic side. That's something you sort of had to learn is what's the difference, because in some cases we get money from the philanthropic side, and other cases from the business side, and you talk differently. So know who you're talking to, know what your value proposition is. That's on the top.
Dr. Mota.
You didn't talk much about students and how do they fit within your vision in terms of building their own capacity for global.
I appreciate you saying that, and that's one of the slides I kind of had to skip over at the end. But I'll tell you, our academic programs office in college leads the study abroad portfolio. We kind of did that early on. We decided we just didn't have the bandwidth to do that. So they do that. Our focus is on what we call high impact student experiences. So I'll give you two examples. We have partnered with World Food Program Office in Cambodia. This fall, we're going to take 3 students. My associate director is she's teaches in nutrition. She's going to take 3 students to Cambodia. They're going to work with the World Food Program Office there to develop a marketing plan for biofortified rice. And then the students will work on that throughout the fall semester, and they'll make a report to WFD in the spring semester. That's only 3 students, but that's a tremendous amount of impact that we have with students. So we have, I think, 2 students from Ag and Applied Economics and 1 from Human Nutrition. We recently submitted a proposal in NIFA and REEU, so I know that research and extension experiences for undergraduates that can leverage our GAP network and send students to 3 different continents for international internships if we have a proposal. So that's where we're focused. How do we, and then how can we use that to really make our college a destination of choice for students who want international?
Oh, great. Thank you so much for your presentation. I particularly relate with it because I am an entrepreneur. So I like the cycle that you showed from seed to exit, even though I believe that you could have some merger as the exit instead of like the technology. But you mentioned that you pivoted or you have activities going on in East Africa. Have you experienced any sort of transnational shocks while going ahead with just kind of expanding your reach? Because from experience, I believe a lot of the bottlenecks in productivity, especially with the global south and sub-Saharan Africa, is in governance and in just human actions. So what component of the COWS initiative or strategy is addressing that? I know.
Well, so we've engaged, we started out with academic engagement. Our strongest partnership there is with Egerton University in Kenya. They have an African Center of Excellence that's World Bank funded. We partnered with them. It's been a great partnership for years. In fact, our Global Opportunity Initiative, which is our faculty development program, they've been key partners. They've invested in institutions. So it's been a super partnership. I think one of the challenges we found is that in general, universities in that region are not as connected with other sectors as we are. Certainly at land-grant universities. We kind of take for granted, good connection with the ag industry, communities, to extension, and so forth. What we find in the East Africa region is that it's by and large not true. It's not because they don't want to, it's because of the lack of resources. Faculty are told to do extension, but give it no money, and they will tell you almost no credit. So that's one of the challenges is, and when I say academic partnerships are necessary but not sufficient, that's based a lot on our staff experience. So then we've had to find private sector partners that we connect with, and then they can help connect us with the government sector. We're early on in that work, but we had that event in Nairobi that I told you about. Did have a exact title, deputy minister of agriculture who attended that event. That's the kind of thing we want to do, because those are the people who need to hear
question over here.
I noticed the last time I was at your campus that there's quite a lot of activities in Senegal. In fact, if I remember right, there was something about Virginia Tech making them kind of a sister location. How did that happen? How come Senegal is a high priority for Virginia Tech?
So this other office that I alluded to, so the Center for International Research and Education Development, part of the College Act that they have historically as a center for this. 2010, they submitted and won a project that was a $32 million project called Education Research and Agriculture. It was like, unlike most USAID opportunities other than innovation labs, it was written for a higher education institution, and Virginia Tech won it. And it was really all about strengthening the educational, especially the educational and government ecosystem program. It's a partnership with almost every institution of higher education. And that was a project I was fortunate enough to be involved in. Some extensions, that project actually went until I think 2018. Before that project expired, we also won some Tom Archibald. He's in the ag education communication space. Tom Archibald, who was the final chief party for that project, won a follow-on project. One of the things we did in that first project was to stand up 4-H. And so Tom won the smaller project to finish that work. I don't know the numbers, but there's 4-H clubs in a lot of places in Senegal that the work. So it's been really those two projects. My concern, this is above my pay grade, which is tech, is that project is ending pretty soon. Frankly, if I were the vice president for outreach and international engagement at Virginia Tech, I would want to make investments in Senegal. So when that project is over, it doesn't all. I really do think if you go to Senegal and you ask which U.S. university is best known there, I think it's Virginia Tech. I don't think there's anywhere else in the world you can say that about. We don't want to lose that. But that's not right.
Question.
I think there might be one online.
Oh,
There's a
okay.
chat. And then I can-
I'll check. She's got a question. Go ahead.
You had mentioned, I think that you guys have engaged with 35% of the faculty at Virginia Tech.
Well, 25 to 30% in our college.
Oh, in your college, okay. And I guess my question is what does that look like? How do you motivate? You said nobody has to talk to you. How do you motivate folks to interact?
Essentially, almost all of that is we have an opportunity to make it interesting. Human nature being what it is. What was
You
there?
did not. No, there was not. Any other questions?
Yes,
Oh, sorry. Yes, sir.
so the one that I always got worried about is how do we collaborate better as Virginia Tech and Texas A&M with our long history of being similar. When we compete, we have a better football team.
I don't know. I don't think.
Watch the game last week?
Well, I'm not gonna argue with you, Dave.
We won.
Yes.
Tech won our
And so-
games. Was that answer?
So how do we partner? Where do we pick potential partnerships? Where would you see an opportunity to partner as opposed to compete?
Yeah.
I see the $4 million grants. You go your direction, we go our direction for most of those. But are there projects where we should be?
Well, that's part of the reason I'm here. I'm not just here to make a 1 hour talk to a lovely, inspiring audience. But yeah, I think the key to that, Dave, is finding out what can we do maybe that we can do better or more efficiently than you, and vice versa. I think that's what we do. And frankly, that I think that's the direction. I mean, it's not just our two institutions, but yeah, how do we move from just being competitors to being collaborators?
Exactly right. Dr. Tushi?
Thank you for your wonderful presentation. So before you go to those different countries, national countries, how do you make sure that your projects don't duplicate effort from other organizations like FAO, ministries of agriculture, sustainable development goals, SENA, things like that. Because I'm from Rwanda and I know different issues we have in the country where you see different organizations are doing different things instead of addressing different problems. Sometimes they focus on different the same things.
That's a great question. I was in Rwanda last week. And
You just got back from home, so maybe we crossed out.
were you at ATRF?
No,
Okay. that's what
I left the same day started on Monday.
You know, that's really interesting because I spent several years working in Haiti. When I say work, I didn't work there, but I traveled there on this project. And I've heard Haiti called the Republic.
Yes.
And sure enough, that's true. One time we took a trip from Port-au-Prince all the way up to Cap-Haitien. And we scheduled meetings with other NGOs that we had kind of made contact with, and we'd stop and talk for a couple of hours and we'd go on to the next one. They don't know each other. They don't know who's doing what. And sometimes they're duplicating efforts. That's an excellent point. So how do we do that? I mean, some of that's going to be funding driven, obviously, but I'll give you a current example of how we're trying to think through that. So we spend a lot of time in Kenya. We hear a lot about agricultural extension, problems with extension. If you know anything about Kenya, there's something called devolution, and which kind of translated is destruction. So essentially, the extension system has been defunded, given to the counties. The counties don't have any resources to have an extension. Universities see this problem. They do want to be involved in extension, but I already illustrated the problems to you. We're really interested in how can we work with Kenyan universities, in particular, not to recreate the U.S. operating system. Can't do that. I think it's the best in the world, right? But we can't recreate that. So what we're focusing on is how do we, can we help capitalize this on universities about what we're putting this community wage standard. How can universities wage appropriately in agricultural extension? And how do we start those discussions? So in the wake of our gap report, we have leaders from, well, not just academically, from Kenya and Uganda, who are going to come over, attend our event, come to the Virginia Tech campus, and we're going to have a big discussion about that. So I think a big part of this is not trying to impose what we think works for us, not trying to impose it.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and close us down, unless if you have a quick question, sir. Quick.
No, it's really not.
Go for it. Go ahead.
I don't know, we were together and neither of us shared with each other that we both worked in Haiti. So
We were too busy working, weren't we here?
That's right, we were too busy working on our plan, on our project
Well,
for University of Tennessee.
we can talk certainly later about Haiti for sure. When I served on the BIFAD board, it was right when the earthquake happened. And so I think that's your project started not too long after that.
Just after.
Yeah, just after that. And it was a mess. And I remember telling USAID officials a few years after that, when I was providing a report of our activities, that if you can fix Haiti, you can fix anything.
Yes.
For all of those reasons that we just discussed, because it's just for such a tiny place, and yet there's a lot of issues. So it's an incredible place with a lot of needs, let's put it that way. Well, help me thank Dr. Thompson again.
We're going to break.
Very inspirational
Thank you very much.
presentation. Well, before we leave, I wanted to first remind everybody that October the 14th is our next seminar, and it'll be in the AgriLife Center, and we have Samantha Alves from USAID will be our speaker.
By the way,
Yes.
Samantha Alves was my undergraduate student
Get out.
at Arizona.
Are you kidding me?
And Jack
And
Elliott.
Jack Elliott. Okay, then I'm gonna have to tell her that.
My master's student was him.
Okay,
Part of the ambassadors that
Yeah.
are on and
so
all
you
that,
you have
so.
to give us then some inside thing to say, hey, you know, Dr. Thompson said, tell
She
me some
controls
stories
massive
about.
amounts of money.
She does, I know, I get it, exactly, no, she's fantastic. Well, before you leave, in fact, as you leave, there's some boxes there. I was provided several copies of the Successful Farming magazine. This is published every month with about 1 million subscribers, and it serves, you know, the farm family audiences, basically people who do farming for a living on a variety of topics. For example, this particular issue talks about you know, creating a path, you know, it says wanted a successor to the family farm, is to talk to the youth, you know, on how they might kind of get young farmers interested, young people interested in farming. But the thing that I wanted to point out is that on page 30, there's an article, an interview that was done of Julie Borbaugh. And so you, of course, know Julie very well. She granddaughter of Dr. Borbaugh, and she used to work for us as a external relations director. So I just have copies for everybody. Just grab one or more if you like, and make sure you read that article. She was I was talking to her yesterday on the phone, and she said, "So you want an autographed copy there, Elsa?" Anyway. But please take one or more, they're in that box, in those 2 boxes, and thank you so much for coming. We will see you all October 14th, if not sooner.
Speaking of free things, I also have, this is just kind of a 4-page primer on agricultural productivity.
Oh,
It's
the total.
ag productivity, total factor productivity. Yeah, so.
Yes. It's just that it's during our seminars. So I don't want to get very on, but I want to stay around. I got to talk about, no, go, please. I got to talk about
I forgot to ask.
We stopped with the before the state.
It is great to meet Florida State. I have to
I'll talk to them.
Keep me out of trouble.
So, yeah. So we work mostly with.
Nice crowd.
So we work with them.
Oh, and thank you for those of you who are still online.
So.
Hopefully not anybody else. Probably all gone. Yeah, it's just.
Yeah.